So we have about 30 minutes for questions and comments, and we have all the teams still here. You can direct a question at an individual team, or we can get responses from groups. If you were one of the mentors and want to talk a little bit more about the process of putting your class projects together, other faculty members here who also might want to share what they do in capstone experiences or other learning by doing experiences, we'd be happy to hear those too. I've got one microphone, Amanda has another, so remember we're live streaming this. If you'd like to have us come to you with a question or comment, now would be a good time to get that started. Who'd like to go first? Linda Kraxberger.
So we had a number of different teams that used interdisciplinary teams. You had students maybe from PR and journalism, or we had computer science and other places across campus. For those teams who collaborated outside of their discipline, I just kind of like to do a round robin and say, what's the biggest thing you learned about working outside of your discipline? And I know for a fact that the first group that presented had that, so maybe you can start with Soundster, but then go to some of the other groups.
I think for us, one of the main things that I learned, it's easy when you're in college to think that people in your department get you and no one else. That like, if you don't study journalism, you don't understand journalism. If you don't do design, you don't understand design. It's like your little niche that no one can touch. But I think with us especially, we all dabbled in every part of this. So Manav, who actually had to leave, we worked together a lot to get the front end going because he coded what I designed. But I mean, Chris and Rachel and Son had good input on that, even though they're not designers. And vice versa, when Chris was doing the back end, he had questions that we could answer, and just overall making the app function as a cohesive piece with all five of us. I mean, the app reflects our differences and our similarities, I think, so that was really cool.
And as the tech guy, or one of the tech guys on the team, usually when you make something, it's from a technical standpoint. But working with journalism students and especially with the business side, you learn that in terms of creating this app, there's a holistic view of it that you need to take into consideration how the user is actually going to interact with it and what the user experience is going to be. So it could be technically amazing, but if it isn't pleasing to the user, then it's not going to get much usage. So that was what I got out of it.
What about some of the other teams? And it doesn't matter if it was across different disciplines or disciplines within the schools that you're working in. Talk a little bit more about that process.
Okay, well, I'll let Leslie talk a little bit as the professor, how it affected her. But I think, just like in real life, in the classroom, the more diversity you have, the better product you have. I mean, you just have, different viewpoints that think of things that you don't think about. And we were lucky enough, even though we had only 6 students, we had a lot of different backgrounds and, a lot of different age groups, obviously. And so I think that really helped us to design a better product.
From a teacher's standpoint, for me, it was important because when you get out in the real world, you don't work in silos, I mean, I've always crossed over with every different kind of discipline, even though I've come from a graphic design background. So I think it's really, really important to understand how to choose ideas and kind of brainstorm together and work together in those kinds of teams so that you're prepared for that when you get out there.
I always think it's cool, especially with our team, because we did have a lot of diversity, and usually, even though I am PR, also I do design, and having that design background, I chose to try to break out of that mold and do something a little different. And so I think it's always really cool when you do have that diversity of the team. You do have that one objective that kind of bonds you together, and it's to tell that story, no matter what that story is.
One of the things that made our work on Archive different from some of these other projects is the fact that it was not in a class. And so I'm a journalism professor, Cody is an ad PR major, and Mike is a biochem and computer science major. And all of our meetings and all of our work had to be outside of class and outside of their normal class schedules. So the difficulty we had a lot was just physical scheduling and working with that. But then beyond that, it was clear that the two of them, really bonded as a team because each truly had skills the other did not, and they quickly came to realize what each could do and how each, brought the whole thing together.
Adam Cuban, Police and the Press over here, and one thing that we do these students and the ones I've had previously in past iterations of the course, we turn it around. And so the officers then become the aspiring press professionals, and then the students get a chance being officers. And so we turn it around, and then we recreate a newsroom at the police station, and then I channel my inner newsroom demeanor, complete with bad words, and I give them pressure, and I give them a fake phone number that's actually my number, and then we create an environment where from the officers, they're given a crime report, a mock crime report that we've pre-produced, and say, okay, write a 150-word brief for that. That's going to go on our website. And oh, by the way, do it in 5 minutes, and I want one soundbite. And so you need to call this number, and it's my number, and then I answer and I say, no comment. And then I, just so they get a feel for what it might be like for existing press professionals, and sometimes that frustration that occurs. And I think that embracing vulnerability, understanding how professionals operate and some of the protocols, the practices that govern those professions is very, very important to facilitate that understanding.
As I'm sure it's true of all these projects that you've seen today and a lot of the others that you work with, the investment in this kind of project, whether it's in the classroom or outside the classroom, is a lot more investment than you might normally expect from both the students and from the teachers. One of the things I'd like to hear from the students and the faculty is about the mentoring process. I mean, we spent 1 hour a week with 4 teams, the mentors did, each week, as well as having a professional mentor from our client, working with these teams to try to take them all the way through the ideation process to the development process to the marketing process. And I think that mentoring can happen in a lot of different ways, but somehow it has to be a key part of it. And so maybe some of the students would like to talk first about how their mentors worked, and then we'll ask the faculty.
So my program was really cool. I worked in Capitol News Service twice a week from like 9 to 5, 9 to 6. So it was basically in a newsroom setting, 2 full days a week. And I had a lot of time to work, just Christine and me on our own, just getting our feet wet in JavaScript and other stuff that we were doing. But we had Sean Mussenden, who I think stepped out for a minute, and then Nick Diakopoulos, who both would help us along the way. But it was really like a lot of us doing stuff on our own, and then them just kind of like stepping in to guide us along. But really like getting us to like ask ourselves questions so that we could just build on the research ourselves.
Who else would like that? Lots of folks.
Well, I don't think for the last 2 months that I've gone a single day without a text or a phone call or an email from Professor Cuban. But he really wasn't our only mentor in this. We had those one-on-one sessions with the cops, which lasted usually about 4 hours apiece. And our understanding of it was that everything that they told us could not be reported on. We couldn't talk about it later. They were going to give us their honest opinion about stuff that was going on. And that was probably one of the most interesting things that I've had done. And I really built relationships with them and got to get their business cards and actually text them still. But Cuban, he was always there, always. And we met a lot, and we met every single week for class for that almost 3-hour class.
So back when I was an overly ambitious freshman, I met Gary. I was giving a presentation, and he asked me to come to a roundtable discussion with Alberto Ibargüen, who is he's the CEO of the Knight Foundation. And that actually spurred an internship for me at the Knight Foundation the following summer. And that's when things really started clicking for Gary and I. And I just have to say, you've been a great mentor. So the thing about the way that our relationship has worked is that we've been doing this for 4 years now. So I say, the relationship at first was a mentorship, but it evolved into a friendship pretty quickly. And I think that, this is something that has been invaluable in my college career, and that's understanding how work relationships like this can kind of unfold. And I look forward to, continuing that. So
I'm for clown.
I promise this wasn't a deliberate suck-up question, but go ahead.
So for us, we actually had the privilege of working with an interdisciplinary group of mentors in addition to an interdisciplinary group of students. And so that was a huge privilege for us. And as Mike mentioned, we did have weekly meetings with them, which was great because not only did it motivate us to get to continue working on the project constantly. We wanted to show up to that meeting with something to show the mentors and to demonstrate, okay, here's what we've accomplished this week. But in addition to that, we had such a variety of perspectives. As he mentioned, we had a student mentor, we had faculty mentors, we had mentors who were representatives from the public media platform. And so what they really did for us is sort of pushed us to think about our app from every possible perspective and to think about every possible detail involved in it. And so I think sometimes we got tunnel vision as to, okay, well, what do we need for the final presentation for this competition? And they really pushed us to think beyond that and to really think about the full potential of the app even beyond the competition itself. So,
just one short thing to add. In terms of what the mentors provided for our team, we weren't even a team until after the pitches. Rachel and Alex had two programmers who actually dropped out at the last moment. Me and Manav wanted to compete but didn't express interest until late, and it was Mike who directed Alex and Rachel to me and Manav. Our first idea was rejected, but they liked our concept, and so they gave us a chance to refine our idea. And so because of their investment in the students and investment in this competition, we were able to form a team and develop this really good idea, and here we are today. So a lot of our success is attributed to the mentors.
So our class originally started as meeting once a week for 3 hours, and I think, one of the strong suits of Donica was, especially during our design thinking process and our ideation process, one person said, life is not working in silos, right? And we had a variety of personalities. And I would be lying if, I said we all got along all the time and it went smoothly. And I think that one of the things that Donica really did well for our team was to keep us moving forward and to really push us. And we had a really successful event because she kept us, moving forward, even though it was difficult at times. It was very difficult, so.
And also just encouraging us to kind of think outside of the box a little bit. We were working with a very tech-oriented community, and the direction that journalism seems to be going in is very web-based and mobile, and what we learned from the community was that they really wanted the chance to meet face-to-face. And so I think just being encouraged to think about other solutions besides just online communication was really important too.
Yes, just wanted to say that Leslie and Val had very different backgrounds. Leslie's graphic design, as you said, and Val is a journalist. Basically, we knew we had an app class. We knew we were making an app. And when we came in, they said, okay, this is your client. What do you want to do? So they empowered us really to make this ours. We got to, decide on the design and what kind of content we would do and really the direction of the app. So I think that was great. We weren't boxed into one thing. It wasn't, okay, well, you're going to make a magazine and we want this, this, and this. Go do it. It was really just, what do you want to do? And we weren't a large team, so we were able to pretty quickly narrow it down and say, okay, well, this is what we want to try. And like anybody who's ever done a project, what we would like to accomplish would have taken us about 4 years, not one semester. So we really had to pare it down. But yeah, so they were really good mentors and just empowering us to do kind of what we wanted to do instead of setting too many boundaries for us.
So one of the things that I got involved on the archive project a little bit later than when Gary and Cody worked on it, and so basically, it's taught me a lot. I'm more of a chemistry major myself, so I like the chemistry, and I actually was a software developer for a time before I came back to school, and basically it's taught me a lot about journalism, which is something I wanted to study in middle school, but my guidance counselor decided that a home ec class would have been better for me. And so I got to make cake with no dairy products. It tasted horrible without frosting. And so there's a lot I've learned on this project, like how to work with people and like teams and all that. And I'm not going to say it's been the smoothest ride possible because I have a car with a shock that's bad in the back, so it's not that smooth. It's not that smooth riding right now, But I mean, I've learned a lot. I've worked with a lot of great people, and just, I mean, I've done so much. Like, I can't even find words, and of course, I'm bad about finding words too. So it might have been good that I took that home ec class. But yeah, like I said, I mean, we've done amazing things, and I've learned a lot. Like for software development, just I'm trial by fire, and well, this was a trial by fire.
Other questions or comments for our student teams?
This is really great for me because it's insight for me and how education works. I've never went to J school, but to me, I look at your guys' projects and I think you guys are independent producers. You guys are independent journalists, which I think is kind of a lot of where really good, high-quality investigative journalism is going. And so I'm really excited to see that you're all doing these kinds of things. I'm wondering in your projects when and if and when you thought about scale and distribution. Was that built into the process for you guys? Which is a challenge for any independent journalist, I think.
Thank you. So I'm with Hearsay, and I don't know if any of you are familiar with Curious City, which is a project out of Chicago, but it's a somewhat similar. It's designed to engage the Chicago community in some storytelling. It's not personal people's stories. It's more reporting based. But that project recently went like national, and that same sort of network and framework that the people in Chicago designed is now being taken to public radio stations all across the country. And I know that's something that we definitely had in mind with Hearsay. Like the map in our logo is of Columbia, but like that could easily be any map. And I think our project, we wanted it to be general enough to make sense in any community. And so that's something we've definitely had in mind, is keeping things workable for our community specifically, but easily adaptable to any community. And then once we saw that Localer, which is this national public media kind of grant funding project, was going to be accepting applications for new grants, it's something that we immediately started talking about, if that was something that we could apply for and then turn into a job maybe for one or more of us looking forward. So that's something I think we had in mind from the beginning, but has definitely taken shape over the course of the project once we saw like what the workload was really like.
Yeah, so with Archive, obviously we could have started much bigger. I think early on in the project we realized that we were going to have to control our own ambition. Of course, it would have been easy to say, oh, we're going to hit our state and 3 surrounding states, but we knew from the get-go that that was just not going to work. And I think that scale was massively important to us because the people that we knew who we could actually develop a relationship with, which is essential in this project, were right, kind of next door. So that was extremely important to us. And I think that that kind of shows, if you're working on a smaller team, you have to be realistic about who you're actually going to be able to talk to. And of course, the most successful, newspaper visits that we went on were the ones that we actually did in person. It would be extremely difficult to, call a paper to get them to enroll in this, because when you call somebody with a pitch like that, it sounds more like a pitch than just an authentic, conversation that you can have face to face with somebody.
From the Soundstress point of view, we had, in terms of developing this idea, just an array of features we wanted the app to have. But one of the things our mentors, really wanted us to think about was the minimum viable product. What is the value proposition, to use Ruben's terms? What is the value proposition of this app, and how are you going to deliver on that? And so us, having to cull down our massive list of features into what it is our app presents, and have that developed for a final presentation here, and then building off of that. And so having a product that individual users could use, as well as maybe a small station or one of the larger public media providers would find useful.
Can I clarify that? My question is really more about how did you start thinking early about how people would find your app?
Yes. So how would people find our app? Yes. So in our marketing strategy, that is definitely one of the things that we thought about, using social media, word of mouth, whether it was paid ads and whatnot. So those were things that were built in our marketing, built into our marketing strategy, which was one of the aspects of our competition. How are you have this great product, hopefully, and now how are people going to find it? And so yes, that was built into our thought process.
So in terms of the biggest little startup fair, because it was an event instead of a website, there's already been discussion in the community to have it again. During the event, there was already discussion about making it an annual thing, but the students didn't want the participatory journalism class to become the startup fair class. So students ultimately decided to let the next cohort of grad students go through the design thinking process for their own, because from my experience, it is a very messy but very useful process, and you don't really learn it if it's a cookie cutter thing that the previous class already laid out for you. But so the community is already discussing throwing it on their own, and certainly students will volunteer their time to help them, so to be continued.
Who's next with a question or comment?
Congratulations to everybody and all your projects. I wanted to talk to Ball State, perhaps my favorite or one of the two favorites. So as I was watching your presentation, I was thinking that technology aside, no matter how far we go, even if we get to the Jetsons area, what you're talking about is still going to be relevant to all of us and to all of our students and communities. And so you said early on that you didn't want, so I'm thinking about the learning doesn't stop when the class happens, and also you can teach your peers, your community members, your family, friends. And you said early on that you didn't want to become too immersed or too friendly, how to love the police, how not to go to one side or to the other. So as I'm watching and I'm listening to the taser situation, when you were watching, how to get feel tasing, I thought about what was happening. I forget where. There's so many. When the person we're watching somebody get shot, or I'm wondering, I pulled out the wrong one. I thought it was my taser, but it was something else, right? And so, there's this sort of pushback from the police now that's sort of saying, we're good people too, and nobody in here would disagree with that. But I wonder what your takeaway from spending all of that time with the police, learning what you're learning in what appears to be a great class. What's your takeaway as you continue to follow the news, and what would you teach those who are in the class later, or any of us as we go back and teach?
I would personally say that the best way to experience what we did you would have to go through it. There's no way the judge and officer and those mistakes that they're making until you kind of feel that fear that they made us simulate. We did like a fake car stop where they had weapons hidden from us everywhere, and they were yelling at us like we were in a real situation, like, well, why'd you pull us over? This is none of your business. And I never knew that kind of tunnel vision and just kind of how you freeze. Really what I took away from the class is that officers are people and they make mistakes like we do, and it gets really scary even when you're trained to do otherwise.
One of the biggest things I took away, especially with video proof emerging of officers doing things that maybe they shouldn't be doing according to what people perceive, is that you have to take a step back. You don't jump on the bandwagon, the social media, the police brutality, excessive force, the buzzword bandwagon, and you have to take a step back and think about what that officer was thinking. Most of the time we don't know what the call was coming in. You don't know if the dispatcher said that the person had a gun, maybe it wasn't true, but it's an interesting perspective to be able to step back and think like an officer. I think that was one of my most important takeaways, to be able to look at videos and stories and really think about what could have happened, what actually happened, not what the social media and all the people online are saying.
Looks like we have time for maybe one, maybe two more questions for our students, or a comment from a faculty member about their processes.
Actually, just a question to the other mentors. I think we can all see from these demonstrations that this type of project really works, creating teamwork, multidisciplinary work, teaching all of those values, but it's small. How do we scale this is sort of my question. How do we scale this to the curriculum?
So one of the things that we have in terms of scale, we have 10 app teams right now in a class developing iOS apps. So at the end of the semester, we will have produced 10 separate projects. And it's a joint effort. So the class is a cross-listed course between the journalism school and our IT department in the IT program in the Department of Computer Science over in engineering. So this semester we have 10 journalism students and 31 programming students in this cross-listed course. And each journalism student, this is the first time we've done it this way, one student per app from the journalism side. So each one of those students is shepherding their own app through the development process in a 15-week span from zero to finished pitch, like what you just saw from Soundster, but not quite as sophisticated. So putting it into the curriculum that way and then treating the class like a workshop class where they come into class and we're building their skills, but really treating them in a more professional environment where a lot of the work takes place outside of the class is a way that we've scaled it up. And that was Mike McKean's doing. That class launched, 4, 5, 6 years ago? 5 years ago, and we've been doing it since. But that cross-campus collaboration is how we were able to scale.
I will say one thing just to follow on that and then come back to you, but one of the problems we have is that even in our schools where we have a pocket or many pockets of innovation, interesting classes going on, we have that age-old problem of how well we communicate across those different programs. I mean, we hosted something like this a few days ago, and although it's my job as the director of the Futures Lab to find all these innovations that are going on within the school, I didn't know a lot of the things that were happening until I put out a direct solicitation, and we finally got the process going of bringing all these projects together. And I think once the school has a better, more complete knowledge of all the things that are happening, then you tend to see that growth happen very quickly.
I think he has something on yours. Oh, well, what I'm just interested in is I imagine you had a competition, and these were the 8 that you decided to present. I would be interested if we could know more about who else applied and what other ideas are out there that we can see and appreciate.
Maybe I should go first then, because I did have a comment on the curricular question. And to that end, I might throw a shout out to page 9 in the program, this Adobe line, let's get creative, let's change the world. I might start with, let's change academia. That might be my first start. And I know it's live streamed and people hear that, and I'm a tenure track faculty member, so this is a roll of the dice for me to say that. But the reality here is that we're trying to change, and it's going to be gradual and it's going to be slow because we're in the middle of a paradigm shift. And I think that one of the things I see as a younger, newer faculty member is that you have to be looking at, as students, and I know we have some of them in this room, you're going to learn how to report, you're going to learn how to produce, you're going to learn how to generate content, mobile, tablet production, but about what? What's your area of knowledge? Where do you understand things outside of your discipline? And I'm not talking just a passing familiarity because you read a few headlines. I'm talking about depth of knowledge. Maybe not necessarily expertise, but higher education has to be a little bit more accepting of that idea, the intersection and the weaving. And that comes back to faculty too. We need to be able to cross over the aisle, and maybe not just necessarily from journalism to TCOM and journalism to PR. I mean, that's a start, but yeah, I hear computer science, I hear chemistry, I hear natural sciences, criminal justice from my class. Academia has to start to adopt that mentality, and that's going to facilitate, I think, the arrival of more projects because faculty won't necessarily feel the pinch, especially when they have the pressure to translate these projects into something that's deemed scholarly.
And I agree completely with that. I don't want to let your question slip by before we finish. We did put out an invitation to the JI mailing list and to faculty we knew who were doing this kind of thing, and we only received about 3 more applications to present today than you actually saw. We probably could have squeezed them all in. I will say this, though, I think we've proven that this concept of sharing at this conference what these great students are doing is a great idea, and I hope that after this first year, if we try it again next year when we're all going to Gainesville, we'll have 2 or 3 times as many students applying. It really will be a competition, and we'll see even more diversity in the kinds of projects that our students are doing. So let's give everybody who did present today a big round of applause.